to Dr. Essack Mitha, who is the principal investigator at the Newtown Clinical Research Centre, to talk to us about the vaccine by Pfizer. Hopefully, he's going to tell us it is the silver bullet, or maybe not. Dr. Mitha, assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Wa alaikum salam. Jazakallah for having me. It's an honor.
Good news or bad news, or I should imagine it's a bit of both. Is this the silver bullet we've been waiting for?
I think it's too early to confirm, but it looks very, very promising. So let's just put it into a little bit of perspective about what this means. Pfizer is one of the clinical trials that are doing the vaccine trials for COVID-19 globally. And they're one of those that are in the advanced stages. So there are about 6 different companies that have advanced clinical trials going on at the moment. And what they have found from early analysis of the data is that the vaccine is proving to have some sort of protection effect against COVID infections. So that's the press release that has come out a couple of days ago, and there's been lots of excitement going on about that. I think that it is an incredibly good news story because it shows that there is something to look forward to in terms of getting a vaccine to the market as soon as possible.
Okay, so you are the principal investigator at the Newtown Clinical Research Centre. What exactly is your role? Are you connected with Pfizer? And you've also talked about a few other companies, pharmaceuticals, that are also busy trying to get a vaccine to market as soon as possible. So first, let's understand who you are and how we find you in this space.
Okay, so I'm a medical doctor, a general practitioner, and I have been doing clinical trials since 2004. So I've built up quite a strong reputation in the clinical trial industry. Newtown Clinical Research is a private site. We are situated in downtown Johannesburg, and so it's close to home. And we have been doing work with various pharmaceutical companies over the last 16 years. So the Pfizer company that we are doing this trial with is just one of the companies that we have worked with. So we've actually done trials in asthma, in hypertension, in diabetes, HIV. So it's across the board. Pfizer approached me and 3 other sites in the country earlier this year with the view to taking part in this clinical trial. And I agreed, and they asked me to be the national principal investigator. Basically, it just means that I'm the face to the study in South Africa. We were given a task to find 800 patients. 210 of those patients in South Africa were at Newtown Clinical Research. So we've got a fantastic team that's set up over here, very experienced staff, and we try and do a bit of training as well for people without clinical trial experience. It's an exciting place to be. Because we sort of on the cutting edge of medical research and what's going on out there globally. And we offer the patients in the area a chance to actually be part of research, get exposed to medication that they probably wouldn't be able to get exposed to for the next 6, 7, 8 years, even sometimes. So it's incredibly rewarding, and alhamdulillah, we've been able to do what we do for the last couple of years.
MashaAllah, that's absolutely wonderful. So and obviously, inshallah, once there is a vaccine available and it is made available not only to South Africans but globally, you then move on to investigate vaccines for other dreaded or diseases, or possibly even maybe the common cold, whatever it might be. So your work is ongoing, is it not?
Yeah, so with this trial in particular, it is definitely ongoing because although the early results have shown promise, there's still a way to go in fulfilling the endpoints for this research project that we are doing. So the patients on this particular study will be followed up for another 1.5 years. We're collecting ongoing safety data and making sure that if they are developing infections, we check whether it's a COVID infection or not. and that feeds into the data that this that Pfizer is collecting. But like you said, there are lots of other companies, some of them doing COVID research and some of them doing other forms of vaccine research. So there's usually a lot of activity around influenza. Not your common cold, but the more serious influenza infections. And that is something that we've got in the pipeline for this coming year as well. But besides that, there's research into new therapies for diabetes, for HIV. So it's very exciting at the moment, Shubha.
Mm-hmm. So for all the dreaded diseases, that's very reassuring. Do the different companies, the different pharmaceuticals, do they share information, or is it all about, we're the first to come on board with this? And then, because obviously we know that all of this costs a lot of money, research, etc. And then you go on and patent the company, then the pharmaceutical would then, if successful, if it proves to be a success, they go on to patent that particular vaccine or meds or whatever the case may be.
Yeah, so there is some sort of collaboration that takes place, but by and large, this is a company that needs to derive a profit. So they will need to ensure that they balance their profits with exploitation and things like that. So with this particular pandemic that we are going through, there was actually a lot of media attention that was placed on the leading vaccine companies getting together and saying that they are going to try and work according to a set of standards that they can all abide by to ensure that the research that is being done is transparent, ethical, and with the goodness of people at heart. So there is some collaboration that is taking place. With this particular protocol, it's actually a collaboration between Pfizer and a German company called BioNTech. BioNTech have developed the mechanism with which this vaccine can actually start having its effect. So there is collaboration that does take place between certain organizations, but a bit of independence as well between big farmers.
And I understand that the German company has two, a husband and wife, Turkish couple, both scientists, Muslims at that is working then. They've been working closely and very hard at developing their part of the vaccine. Is that correct?
Yeah, so there's been lots of social media posts going around about who the owners of BioNTech
Yes.
are, and the story that I've seen so far is yes, the gentleman who's a professor, he's the one that the main guy at BioNTech who started it up. He started his life in Germany at the age of 4 years old. His father was working in a Ford factory. So immigrants from Turkey into Germany. And he set up a company that was sold a few years ago for, I think, something like 1 billion euros. And now he's got BioNTech, and BioNTech's shares has started surging over the last year. So I think at last count it was worth something like 20 billion euros. So an incredibly large company, incredibly large values of money being thrown around here. But my impression and what I've read up about him is that he is a very humble, down-to-earth guy, and I hope one day I get to meet him and tell him how much
Inshallah.
the South African population has actually benefited from the work that he started doing.
Inshallah. Dr. Mitha, let's look at the vaccine now. The America is suggesting that the vaccine is going to be available as early as December, which is 2 weeks away. It's going to be available as early as in 2 weeks' time to be administered to the population. That sounds a bit far-fetched to me, because you're also suggesting that you're going to continue with your study for at least another year and a half, because you need to see that it meets all of the, I should imagine, requirements in terms of safety and efficacy. Having said that as well, and then I also wonder about costs. There's also talk about storage. Apparently, it needs to be stored at very low or cold temperatures. Otherwise, it loses its efficacy. So there's all of that to be taken into account. So is America jumping the gun here? How do you feel about it? And I've also read somewhere, which has disappointed me terribly, that the vaccine may not be available anytime soon to the larger South African population.
Okay, let's put it into perspective. Firstly, the statements will be coming out of Pfizer and not from the American government, right? So Pfizer is the company that is developing the
Okay.
vaccine in partnership with BioNTech. What they are looking at, and this is because of the pandemic situation, is that they are expediting getting the vaccine to market, provided it fulfills certain criteria. So what criteria need to be fulfilled is actually predetermined by the United States FDA. So those are the guys that have approved the trial. Our regulators have also approved the trial. But the FDA is like the overriding authority on this one. It's an American company. America's involved in the research. So they said, right, you need to prove certain things to us, and we may give you something called an emergency use authorization. And the emergency use authorization would give the company permission to start producing and distributing the vaccine globally. And the research needs to continue in the background. So it sort of represents your best hope at a product that may give you great benefit, balancing that risk. So it's a balancing act, right? So you're going to look at the potential of damage of not using the vaccine if it was going to be a viable and effective vaccine. What Pfizer has said is their safety data that would meet this criteria, they should have by the end of November. They would still need to take that data to the FDA, and the FDA will need to give them the emergency use authorization, and then they will start producing the vaccine. And they are estimating that they will produce 50 million doses before the end of December 2020, and then they would be able to produce 1.3 billion doses in 2021. So if you put it all into perspective, our global population somewhere around 8 billion, it means that roughly 20% of the world will have access to this vaccine next year. How that vaccine gets distributed is the key thing, right? So the South African government, as of the last couple of days, has still not secured a supply from Pfizer, but I think that that discussion is ongoing. They have set up meetings to discuss with Pfizer. And I think that there's a few different things that may be going on behind the scenes rather than just saying, hey, I want some vaccines. There are other companies that the South African government has expressed an interest with. So where they end up with Pfizer, I am not going to be 100% certain. And I think that's a question for the Department of Health. But what may happen is you would get criteria for who can use these vaccines. So we might very well end up with a scenario where only those frontline workers, people over the age of 60, people with comorbid diseases will be eligible to get this vaccine. And that will go some way in ensuring that there is a fair and equitable distribution of this vaccine globally. But it would require the engagement of the different countries' departments of health with the company itself to ensure that the product is registered and approved and sold in the country.
So for now, obviously, I'm thinking, all right, Alhamdulillah, we're in almost in midsummer, but by March, April next year is typically when, or April at least, when our flu season starts. And I'm wondering, will the vaccine be available for those people that you've alluded to, the people that need it the most? Do you think that there's that chance that we might be fortunate enough to get the vaccine? Then we need to look at costs. Is it going to be affordable? And lastly, the issue around, we know there's been this ongoing debate about safety of vaccines. There's also certain cultural and religious groups that refuse to be vaccinated, not necessarily for COVID, but any other vaccine. Their religion doesn't allow them because they believe maybe it's not halal or kosher, or there is also a school of thought that if taking vaccines, whatever vaccines, you put your child or yourself at risk for other diseases and other conditions like autism, for example. Your take on this?
So I think you will always get people who will object to certain things being done. I am a scientist, and I like to base everything that I do on scientific fact, and I base it all on research. So when you look at the effects of vaccine in eradicating diseases around the world, they are definitely effective. Okay. Um, I think the issue about halal and kosher and things like that is a very real concern, but again, balanced off with what is available and risk. And I don't claim to be a religious scholar, but in my opinion, if you have a treatment that is questionable, but it prevents disease, and there's no alternative, I think that that's something that should be considered. However, with this particular vaccine, why it's so interesting is because it's not using a live culture. It's not using an actual organism or a part of an organism. It's actually produced in a lab, and it's teaching your body how to develop the antibodies to a COVID infection. So the issue is about whether it's an actual live administered organism is sorted out. Also, sometimes with vaccines, you need to develop them in an egg culture, and people who have certain intolerances and allergies won't be able to take it. So that is not happening with this particular vaccine. So the egg culture is actually taken away. So I think a lot of the side effects and things like that that we are used to seeing in vaccines may not actually happen in this one. However, it is a vaccine that is administered. There are some expected side effects, but fortunately for this study, so far globally, we have not seen a single serious side effect that warranted us stopping the trial or being concerned about safety prolonged on the study.
Costs?
Um, Before we get onto the cost, you mentioned the temperature, and that's a real concern at the moment.
Mhm.
So we are keeping the vaccines in an ultra low temperature freezer, which reaches minus 80 degrees. Okay. Your household freezer, where our Ramadan savories are kept, is normally minus 20, and your refrigerator is between 2 and 8 degrees. So this is not a vaccine that you can store in your fridge or your home freezer. It would need something more than that. So there is a question mark that is posed. But the various vaccine experts that we have been speaking with are all of the opinion that this product will probably be tested at different temperatures as well. And it may actually be tweaked or manipulated in a way to make it more stable at temperatures that would make it easier to use in far off remote areas. So I think there's a little bit of work still to do, but everybody is optimistic about that. With cost, Pfizer have not said anything about cost yet. Uh, there have been articles doing the rounds on the internet from around August this year, where the estimated cost was around $20 per dose. So it immediately puts it into a bit of perspective that this is not going to be something that is prohibitively expensive. What the actual cost will be, I think we'll find out in the next couple of weeks.
Okay, and you alluded to side effects with the ongoing trial. What were some of those side effects that may have concerned you as, the chief investigator or other scientists for that matter?
Yeah, I think there is nothing that actually concerned me thus far.
Okay.
So without giving away a lot of details about the actual side effects that had occurred, right? We've dosed our 210 patients here, and we've given them the second doses. And we've had doses given by the other sites in South Africa as well. And we have not seen any serious side effects. We have not had any patients that were removed from the study because of severe side effects. We had no pause in the study because of side effects. And that just goes towards what we anticipate to be a fairly well tolerated product. There are side effects, and I think the actual details of that will be released by Pfizer in due course.
In the meantime, your closing comments to our viewers and listeners this morning in terms of how do we keep safe? Do we continue with, and I should imagine that's good practice, social distancing and masking up?
Yeah, everybody's tired of the lockdown. Everybody's tired of wearing the masks. It's uncomfortable. But if you watch what's going on in the Eastern Cape at the moment, it gives you a clear indication of how this virus can start spreading again. And the president actually spoke about that in his address last night. If we are not careful, especially now in the holiday season, there are lots of weddings and functions taking place and school events that are taking place where people are planning on mingling. If you're going to do that and you're going to spread this infection to an elderly person who ends up in ICU or her life is severely impacted by it, it's going to it leaves a lot to be desired. So I think we've got to be responsible. We've got to dig in deep and just try and push through for the next couple of months. Just try to make sure that we are still cautious. You're getting out there, the shops are open, you can still go out and do what you need to do, but just be aware. Keep your mask on, sanitize, and keep your distance from people where you can. If you're driving downtown Joburg at the moment, it's very different to what it was 3 months ago, because now I would say about 10% or 20% of the people are actually wearing masks, where 3 months ago was 10% or 20% that were not wearing masks. So the attitude of people is changing, but we've just got to be vigilant, because if we're not careful, we're going to be hitting peaks again very, very soon. That's going to impact on all of us all over again.
Okay, we've had a caller wanting to know, how do they become part of a clinical trial?
It's something that, there are various sites around the country that do clinical trials, and there are always different indications at different times. So I think the best thing to do would be to try and find out who in your area might be doing clinical trials and find out what is going on in terms of clinical trials at the moment or projected for the next couple of months. So sometimes there's advertising that takes place, but not always. Like for instance, in our trial, fortunately, we had a sufficiently big database of patients, so we actually never needed to advertise for people to come and join this trial. But there are some places that do advertise. So just do a little bit of research, find out from many doctors that you know in the area who might be doing trials close by. There are sites in Lenasia, there are sites in Joburg, in the East Rand, Pretoria. So just depending on where you are, there will be people doing trials, and just finding out which trials they are taking part in.
Dr. Essack Mitha, the Principal Investigator at the Newtown Clinical Research Centre, Jazakallah so much for your time. May you be rewarded for the amazing work that you and your team are carrying out, and hopefully we'll be in touch again soon for an update.
Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum.
Wa alaikum salam. 12:08, and there you have it, some good news. It is happening, and inshallah, we do hope that we in South Africa too will be have the opportunity to get our hands on these vaccines. Still to come on the show, we'll now be talking, I think, to another doctor, and that is Dr. Rabia Good. We're going to be talking about keratoconus, something we touched on with a young lady last week on the show.